Mr. Asad, my fellow panelists, most respected Shri Rajiv Sethi, Mr. Manuel Rabate, distinguished audience in the auditorium, and dear students. I am delighted to be here in the International Museum Expo, but I am a little frightened to talk about a subject which may not suit for this kind of a gathering, where people are deliberating about the museums. I am going to talk something about demuseumization. And this is the subject which I think needs a little thought. And I am talking to you in particularly in Indian context. So please understand that whatever I am telling you is entirely focusing on the Indian context. And I apologize if I would hurt anybody's feeling regarding anything which I am going to talk. They are not intentional. Another thing is that since I belong to the Ministry of Culture, let me give the disclaimer that my thoughts do not belong to the thoughts of Ministry of Culture. They are purely an individual thoughts. So it's only a food for thought which I am trying to put in front of you. So current trends in the museum fields are mostly Eurocentric. Museums field developed from collectors who were rich and who used to travel to faraway places and who used to bring objects to their countries, mainly European, from colonies, Asia, Africa, Pacific, South America, etc. Even the word museum is derived from the Greek word muses. Museum field evolved all over the world from a vision of Europeans and Americans. All these countries are full of objects looted, brought, purchased, borrowed, and gifts from erstwhile colonies. The interpretation of these objects is through Western ethos. Museology taught in India is based on the curriculum developed in the East. There has been a trend which can be termed as museumization of objects. Objects are not displayed or kept in context. Museums have become synonymous to history. Custodians holding the objects are completely oblivious to the background of the object. And that is why I am trying to present a few cases. For instance, Western paintings of Renaissance period in Europe are treated and varnished and are displayed in aesthetically pleasing manner, whereas objects belonging to our cultures have been displayed along with accretions like patina, corrosion, deformation, etc. over them, giving them antique, old ethnographic look, etc. These are completely against the ethos in the Indian context. And you can see the most pious Vrindavani Vastra, which is being hanged as hanging religious ritual equipment. This is the Vrindavani Vastra. And I remember when I went to Museum in France to see another piece of Vrindavani Vastra. It was kept in highest of security. And the people in Assam were anxiously waiting to receive that Vrindavani Vastra. And a huge expectation was there, and they were expecting lakhs and lakhs of people to receive that Vrindavani Vastra, which was almost 400, 500 years old. But if it is hanged like this is not an object to be hanged like this, that we all know. Normally, these objects belong to religious, tribal, folk, and classical forms. However, the objects from India are classified in Western museum terminology as ethnographic objects. Surprisingly, Mughal miniature of Jahangir era is kept in Middle East department. Few years back, the Vrindavani Vastra of Assam was classified under China department. Lately, it has been put in textile collection, but not in Indian collection. There are innumerable examples of such discrepancies. Some are out of ignorance, but some are deliberate. Museum field has been subject to such stubborn discrimination since the establishment of first museum in India and is still continuing. There is a requirement of complete redefinition and explanation of artifacts and their housing, which currently is known as museums in India. It is important here to mention briefly the development of museums, archaeology and cultural institutions in India. In the eyes of the Europeans, India was maligned as a land of monstrous, barbarian, childish, stringent races. Then with the new developments in archaeology, India became for the West the home of heroic Aryan race and the Indo-European tongues, and the holy spring of Buddhism and the art of the Far East. These impressions, coupled with historical discoveries made by the British district collectors and archaeologists in the late 19th centuries, led them to believe strongly as the benevolent colonizers, as custodians of India's past. They thought that only their archaeologists and historians were believed to have accessed the real past of India, a nation which has degenerated into a hopeless state of cultural amnesia. The patronizing imperial policy of preservation of Indian culture reflected all these contradictory readings of India in its photographed, lithographed documentation of various obligatory durbars of then rulers of small or big states who had submitted to the empire the restoration and museumization of architectural monuments. This also led to educational policies which shielded the Indian artisans from corrupting the influence of modernization. And you can see how we have been practicing to cater the living heritage. This particular image is from the temple of Dharasuram, which is famous for its beautiful sculptures. They are known as the beautiful miniature sculpture, and how religiously people are wrapping it with the cloth, and daily rituals are being performed on this sculpture. Immediately after the independence, India employed certain experts from developed nations to build its founding models as far as those of the best in the world. Some of the cultural institutions were the National Museum Delhi, National Gallery of Modern Art, National Institute of Design, Film Institute, etc. All our places like temples, gurdwaras, tombs, churches, etc. are living heritage that are fostered by local population. The systems in these places have been developed according to local needs and culture. The tangible and intangible heritage are interlinked with each other. The true experience of the material heritage can be felt only in the context of immaterial heritage, that is rituals. Even storage of artifact can be more effective if cultural significance is attached to the objects. Our places like Taj Mahal, Golden Temple, Meenakshi Temple, etc. are live example of management of cultural heritage. You can see how a temple can have the artifacts and art objects which can also be a source of education and teaching for a public by and large, which are generally kept as only an object in a normal museum. The example, this is there, the Ramaswamy temple of Kumbakonam, where Ramayana stories are depicted on the temple walls, can be seen as pedagogic material for children. Art is a living tradition in India. No doubt the skill and art forms are degrading due to neglect of true artists. Their only survival option is either to work for expensive designers as their artisans or by selling their stuffs through hearts and emporiums. They are always at a mercy of these middlemen or looking towards the government aid. Still, the words used for artists from villages, tribal cultures, folk traditions are artisans. We are still carrying the colonial baggage, which is insulting and lacks pride of a nation. It is really needed to revamp our museums, art centers, art galleries. It requires holistic change to include art appreciation from Indian eyes and perspective. Most of the museum professionals prefer to get trained in Western institutes and museums. They try to copy the same methodology for exhibitions. Most of the books in museum field which become part of curriculum are written by foreign authors. Even the terms used for museum elements, architecture, building, showcases, gallery, etc. are in foreign languages. Museums as they are currently managed lack the connection with local ethos. Only few museums in India are visited by local population, such as National Museum, Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum, Bhaulad Museum, Indian Museum, Victoria Memorial, Baroda Museum, Akbar Museum, City Palace of Jaipur. These visits are associated with the building history and some peculiar objects housed in these museums. However, another 1,000 museums, and day before yesterday we launched a directory of museum which says that we have 1,200 museums in India. Such museums are lying in a state of neglect and their objects or messages are not communicated to the local population. This deprives the local population from having the benefits of understanding and learning from the invaluable treasure hidden in the local museums. If the museums are curated with local perspective and context, it is sure that the people by and large would be able to sustain the museums without any external assistance from the government or foreign agency. It is high time that the museums are redefined and given new nomenclature, explained, communicated, preserved, secured according to Indian context for the benefit of public at large, involving Indian artisans, musicians, dancers, and all cultural forms in which India is one of the richest countries in the world. This Eurocentric approach to museums has not only led many important aspects of culture development they are missing from the museums. Conservation of artifact is an important aspect of museums. We have seen in recent times, since India has been following the approaches of developed in the West for the conservation of artifacts, many artifacts have been subject to irreparable damages. Use of lacquers on wall paintings of Ajanta, cellulose acrylate, lamination of manuscripts, removal of corrosion using electrolytic methods are just a few examples. And if you recollect, a few days back, India Today brought out a special issue on the state of the artifact, state of the mural paintings in Ajanta, and a serious concern was expressed in that entire issue of India Today. In case of manuscripts, we chose the Western approach and completely neglected the time-tested, age-old practices of conservation which were part of the rituals. In India, the traditional calendar is different from the Gregorian calendar. The traditional calendars are mainly based on lunar motions, and special days, festivals are earmarked for carrying out rituals, practices to avoid growth of fungus, insects, and other degeneration problems. For example, cleaning of manuscripts on Jyeshtha Shukla Panchami among Jains is a part of the rituals. It helps aeration of manuscripts to keep away insects and periodic cleaning. Wrapping of manuscripts in red cloth is another age-old practice in India and has kept manuscripts safe from insects and dust. Use of neem leaves, camphor, smoke of samrani or loban, cloves are few examples of preventive conservation being practiced in monasteries, temples, etc. These practices are even used by individuals. And you can see Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts has been teaching about the process of preventive conservation. And we have done quite extensive research in these fields. Modern museums, archives, and libraries ignored these rituals and adopted modern conservation strategies which are expensive and not sustainable in long run in the majority of institutions in India. While old age practices, if kept intact, would have saved a lot of important heritage material from decay. It is high time that these practices are put to test using modern day scientific analysis and brought back to museums, archives, and libraries for making conservation practices sustainable and durable. IGNCA has been documenting the rituals practiced in different religious places in India. One such example of documentation of rituals of Brihadeshwara temple in Tanjavur. In India and other countries where there has been a continuity of civilization and tradition, it is seen that some of the important tangible heritage has been saved. The main reason for the safeguard of these objects is mainly the rituals and traditions attached to it. You can see the kind of abhisheka which is being done on a temple, and this abhisheka is being done with a well practiced scientific methods. Such rituals are prevalent from generation to generation. The ethos behind care and restoration of the objects are no way similar to the modern conservation as we see today. However, periodical practices, daily, weekly, or annually, if studied thoroughly, we would find logic behind them and intend to conserve these things naturally. The ritual may be termed as curation, and in temples for cleaning the idols and buildings, such curatorial practices are prevalent even today. Name such as Abhishekam, Alepanam, so many things are there which are being done in the temples. These rituals are there to do the conservation. Even the kolam in the traditional style, which is prevalent in South India, they are also to prevent the insects. This is a very beautiful example of insect control in these areas, and this is also eco-friendly. The Indian tradition has been to celebrate art as a part of the daily life. The daily routine of an Indian family involves a lot of artistic activities. Activities like putting rangoli or creating auspicious motifs in front of house has been a part of daily routine. It was never in our customs or traditions to preserve these things in a museum because we had the capacity to create such things on daily basis. Similarly, our temples or muds had large amount of artworks in form of sculptures, frescoes, murals, or bronze statues. Such things were created to educate and entertain people. The intent was to put these things in daily routine. These places were not restricted to religious assemblies, but were places of social interaction and artistic displays. When we see exquisite murals created in Brihadeshwar temple, we realize that the entire history has been depicted for the knowledge of the common people. Unfortunately, today you are not in a position to see those murals which are there in the Pradakshina of Brihadeshwar temple because there has been experiments of conservation which are not done in the traditional Indian manner. So they have to now close the gallery for the benefit of the people. No one can see those galleries. Even the Ajanta cave paintings are not only piece of art created for the benefit of future generations, but are contemporary narrative of these days. Golden Temple entertain lakhs of people every day. Many of those come to learn and understand crux and essence of the religion. Sambet Shikhar in Giridih allows people to realize the ethos of sacrifice and devotions. We have never been people who would condense their piece of arts into museums and restrict for selected few. Our purpose of art has been very democratic and liberal. We believed in keeping our arts available and open because for us, our religious or social places were also the places for display and discuss art. To conclude, it is important that we come out of the colonial mindset and try to present Indian heritage as per rich and diverse tradition of our country based on the principle of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Culture is a living concept in India, unlike the Western world, where too much of modernization, imperialism, and hegemonic approach has created a gap between the presentation and the actual context. The lifestyle, which includes museum, has resulted in warming of the planet, and the solution lies in the traditions and sustainable practices still being followed in the cultural hinterlands of India. And that is, I presume, is the right approach to demuseumize our thought and philosophy. Thank you very much.